The courtroom door swings open. The courtroom buzzed with quiet whispers as the door creaked open. Every head turned. He walked in slowly, dressed in a simple gray suit. No tie. No assistant. No fanfare. It was Keanu Reeves. But he didn't walk with a star's pride. He looked tired, calm, almost invisible. No one understood why he was there. A-list actors didn't usually show up at local courtrooms, not without an army of lawyers, and especially not in a small-town courthouse like this one. The wood panels on the wall were old and chipped. The flag in the corner drooped. Even the judge's bench looked worn, but Keanu wasn't there by accident. He was the one being accused. Police officer sat confidently on the stand, hands folded, voice smooth. He had the badge, the uniform, the practiced tone, and he was telling the room that Keanu had caused a serious disruption during a traffic stop 2 months ago. The officer claimed that Keanu was speeding, that he was rude, that he resisted, that he threatened the officer with influence, and then, finally, that he tried to bribe his way out of it. The courtroom went silent as the officer finished his statement. Keanu didn't speak. He just sat, eyes low, hands folded, as if he was waiting for something deeper to unfold. A young woman in the gallery leaned over and whispered, "That's not who he is, I don't believe it." Others around her nodded, but no one said anything out loud. The judge, an older man with kind but firm eyes, adjusted his glasses and glanced down at the paperwork. "Mr. Reeves," he said gently, "would you like to speak now?" Keanu stood, up slowly. His voice was soft yet clear. "I was pulled over that day," he said. "I remember everything. But none of what was just said happened." He paused, then looked directly at the officer. Not with anger, not with fear, but with quiet disappointment. "I didn't argue, I didn't threaten, and I didn't offer money. I asked why I was being stopped. I was told my car matched the description of a stolen vehicle. I gave my license. I waited. I even thanked the officer before leaving. That's all." Murmurs started again in the room. The prosecutor frowned. "Do you have any evidence to back that up?" Keanu nodded slowly. "I didn't at first," he said, "but I found someone who did." The back doors of the courtroom opened again. A woman entered. She wore jeans and a hoodie. She looked nervous. In her hands was a small tablet. She was a rideshare driver who had pulled over nearby that same evening. She had been recording with her dashcam for her own protection, and by sheer chance her camera had picked up the traffic stop. The video was played for the court. The screen showed Keanu calmly speaking with the officer. There was no raised voice, no anger, no threats, no bribery. The footage was short, but clear. A stunned silence followed. The judge leaned back, hands clasped. The prosecutor looked down, eyes wide. The officer on the stand froze. "And Keanu?" He didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He just whispered, "Thank you," to the woman who brought the video. What happened next no one expected. The judge called for a brief recess, but he didn't leave. Instead, he looked at the officer. "Sir, do you have anything to say about this video?" The officer tried to speak, but his voice cracked. I don't remember the stop going like that." "Then you've committed perjury," the judge said firmly. "And possibly more." Gasps echoed. Keanu sat back down quietly. The woman with the dashcam sat beside him, her hands shaking. "Why did you even come?" she asked softly. Keanu looked at her and said, "Because truth matters, even when it's inconvenient, even when it hurts." Tears formed in her eyes. "You didn't have to," she whispered. "I know," he said. "That's why I did." Outside the courthouse, news vans started lining up. Somehow, word had already spread. Reporters wanted answers. Headlines were being written. But inside that quiet room, something much more powerful had taken place. A man with fame, wealth, and power had been falsely accused by someone wearing a badge. And instead of running or hiding, he showed up, he stayed calm, and he let the truth speak for itself. But this was just the beginning. The story was far from over. Truth doesn't end at the courtroom door. The hallway outside the courtroom filled with murmurs and flashing cameras. Keanu Reeves didn't stop for interviews. He didn't pose for pictures. He simply walked down the steps slowly, like a man who hadn't just cleared his name, but had carried a weight that no one else saw. Beside him walked the woman who brought the dash cam footage. Her name was Emily. She was 29, single mother, part-time rideshare driver, part-time student. She had no idea that her video would end up protecting someone like Keanu Reeves. "You didn't have to sit through that," Keanu said as they stepped out into the sun. Emily looked at him, her voice still shaky. "I saw what happened that night. I just thought, if it were me, I'd want someone to step up." He smiled gently. "You just changed more than you know." Meanwhile, inside the courthouse, the judge called a private meeting. He summoned internal affairs. The courtroom wasn't just about clearing Keanu's name anymore. It had turned into something deeper, something dangerous. The officer who lied. Officer Bradley sat in a small holding room, sweat forming on his forehead. His hands tapped nervously on the metal table in front of him. He knew the video destroyed his version of events, but what scared him most wasn't the video. It was Keanu's silence. Why didn't he fight back? He kept repeating. Why? Didn't he threaten to sue? Why didn't he go to the press? No one answered. 2 hours later, a quiet knock came on Emily's door. She lived in a small apartment just above a diner. It was barely enough space for her and her 6-year-old daughter. When she opened the door, Keanu was standing there, holding a small plant. "I thought you might like this," he said. "It's a peace lily." She blinked. "You brought me a plant?" He nodded. "It's for courage and gratitude." Emily let him in. Her daughter, Mia, peeked from behind a curtain, eyes wide. "Is that John Wick?" she whispered. Keanu laughed. "Not today." As they sat on her worn-out couch, Emily asked him something that had been eating at her. "Why did you show up in court without a lawyer, without a team? You could have just paid a fine or gotten it dismissed quietly." Keanu's voice was steady. "Because people believe the badge," he said. "And they should, most of the time. But when one person uses that trust to lie and no one pushes back, the lie becomes stronger than truth." He paused. "I've had people protect me my whole life. Assistants, agents, guards. But this, I needed to face it myself, or I'd never sleep again." Emily was quiet. She realized then that he wasn't acting brave for the cameras. There were no cameras. This was something much deeper, something personal. The next morning, everything changed. The local news ran the story with the headline, "False police report exposed by dashcam. Keanu Reeves clears his name with grace." But the national outlets picked up on something else entirely. Keanu Reeves faces false accusation alone, doesn't sue, doesn't rage, just speaks truth. Overnight, the courthouse was flooded with media vans. Protesters began showing up. Some supported the police, others supported Keanu. But the ones who stood in silence with signs that read "Truth Matters" were the ones that caught everyone's attention. Inside the department, Officer Bradley was suspended. But what no one expected was the discovery that followed. An anonymous officer from the same precinct stepped forward. She claimed Officer Bradley had done something similar before, twice. Once to a young black teenager, once to an immigrant with broken English. Both times, the cases had been dismissed quietly. Both times, no video existed. Both victims had no way to fight back. But this time, there was a video. And this time, the man wrongly accused wasn't someone invisible. He was Keanu Reeves. Keanu got a call from the mayor's office. They wanted a meeting. They said they were concerned about the public reaction. But when he entered City Hall, he didn't bring a speech. He brought a manila folder. Inside the folder were transcripts, records, and handwritten letters. They weren't from lawyers. They were from regular people. The teenager, the immigrant. Others who had faced the same false charges. Stories that were buried. People who were too scared to speak. Keanu placed the folder on the desk and said, "I don't want punishment, I want prevention." The mayor leaned forward. "What are you asking for?" Keanu looked her in the eye. "A citywide dashcam program, independent review board, better training, and a public apology to those who were silenced." The mayor said it would take time. Keanu stood up. "I'm not asking you to fix it overnight. Just don't wait until it happens to someone famous again." As he left the building, his phone buzzed. It was Emily. Her voice trembled. "They just broke into my car." Keanu's heart dropped. "Stay inside," he said. "I'm on my way." The fight wasn't over, and now it was getting personal. When silence gets dangerous, Keanu Reeves drove fast, but his mind raced faster. The city skyline blurred past his windows as he headed toward Emily's small apartment above the diner. He wasn't just worried. He was angry in a way that felt unfamiliar. Not the loud, violent anger some people show, but something quiet and sharp, buried deep in the chest. When he arrived, Emily was sitting on the front steps, hugging her knees. Her daughter Maya was upstairs, asleep, unaware that someone had broken into their car and left the doors open, the seat slashed, and the glove box torn apart. "You okay?" he asked softly. She nodded, but her voice betrayed her. "They didn't take anything. They didn't want to steal. They wanted to scare me." Keanu crouched beside her. "Then they don't know you, because you showed more courage than most people ever will." Emily looked at him, eyes watering. "This isn't just about you anymore. They want me to stay quiet." Keanu shook his head. "You don't have to fight this alone." But Emily wasn't the only one being warned. The teenager, who had once filed a complaint against Officer Bradley, received an anonymous message telling him to leave the past alone. The immigrant man, now a father of 3, got a letter with no return address and one chilling sentence: "Keep quiet or be sorry." The truth was no longer just uncomfortable, it was becoming dangerous. Keanu called a small, quiet press conference the next day. No flashy cameras, no celebrity glitz. Just a rented community hall, a microphone, and rows of folding chairs filled with reporters and concerned citizens. He stood on stage and held up a photo of Emily's car. This is what someone did because a brave woman told the truth. He held up another photo of the teenager and another of the immigrant man. This is what they face when there's no video. When the world doesn't listen, they get warnings, threats, silence. He paused, his voice firm but low. "I can afford cameras, security, lawyers. But what about the people who can't? Are they just supposed to stay quiet so others feel comfortable?" The room was silent. Not even the reporters typed. Keanu continued. "This story is not about me. It's about what happens when people with power lie, and those without it get punished for telling the truth." After the press conference, something unexpected happened. A retired officer came forward. He had once worked alongside Officer Bradley. He admitted that Bradley had a pattern, a way of twisting encounters, especially with those who couldn't defend themselves. But until now, no one had listened. Meanwhile, Internal Affairs launched a full investigation. Officer Bradley was placed under full suspension and removed from active duty. The department publicly stated it would review past cases involving him. But Bradley wasn't done. He hired a lawyer, and he filed a counter-complaint against Keanu. He accused Keanu of public defamation and claimed the entire incident was orchestrated to embarrass him. The media exploded. People took sides. Some supported the officer, saying it was all a misunderstanding. Others defended Keanu, pointing to the clear video and the growing number of victims coming forward. But Keanu didn't respond with anger or press releases. He quietly showed up at the next court date. No cameras. Just him, Emily, and the people who had once been silenced. They sat together, a strange group, an actress turned rideshare driver, a teenager, a father, and a movie star. But what connected them now wasn't fame. It was truth. Thus, judge reviewed the motion filed by Bradley's attorney. "Mr. Reeves," the judge asked, "would you like to respond?" Keanu stood. "Yes, Your Honor," he said. "I'd like to speak." He walked slowly to the front. The courtroom was packed. The air was tight with tension. "I didn't come here to destroy anyone," Keanu said. "I came because I believe silence helps lies grow. I didn't say anything false. I didn't attack anyone. I just shared what happened." He turned toward Bradley. "I don't hate you," he said softly, "but I won't protect a lie to make you feel safe." Then he turned back to the judge. "If telling the truth in a courtroom is considered defamation, then this isn't a court anymore. It's a stage." The judge didn't speak for a long moment. Finally, he looked at the officer's lawyer. "Motion denied," he said. "There is no basis for a defamation claim here." The courtroom exhaled. Bradley stood frozen, jaw tight. But the judge wasn't done. "However," he added, "this case has raised serious concerns about law enforcement behavior and accountability. I will be referring the matter to the State Ethics Board." Outside the courthouse, people began to gather, not to protest, not to scream, but to listen. Keanu stepped outside and saw dozens of strangers holding handwritten signs. "We believe truth. Thank you, Emily. Justice isn't a luxury." Keanu looked at Emily and she smiled for the first time in days. "Do you think this will change anything?" she asked. He thought for a moment. "I think it already has." But just as they turned to leave, an officer approached quietly. "Mr. Reeves," he said, "there's something you need to see." He handed Keanu a small, crumpled note left in the courthouse lobby. It read, "You stopped one lie, but Officer Bradley isn't the only one." Keanu folded the note carefully and looked at the officer. "Who wrote this?" The officer shook his head. "Anonymous." A chill passed through Keanu's chest, because that note meant one thing. This wasn't over. Not even close. The message no one expected. Keanu sat alone in his hotel room that night, the note still in his hand. "You stopped one lie, but Officer Bradley isn't the only one." He read it again. The handwriting was shaky, rushed, maybe even scared. Whoever wrote it hadn't wanted to be seen, but the words said enough. He placed the note down and opened his laptop. He didn't call his manager or any legal team. He just started typing names, old newspaper clippings, internal affairs reports, anything connected to Officer Bradley's precinct. Within an hour, a pattern began to form. 4 other complaints over the past 5 years, all against different officers from the same department, all dismissed for lack of evidence. All with the same language in the reports. Keanu leaned back, his mind heavy. He wasn't a detective. He wasn't a journalist. He was just a man, trying to protect the truth. But what he found next made him sit straight. A mother named Sandra Flores had filed a case 2 years ago after her teenage son was arrested in a routine stop. He'd been punched, bruised, and booked without charges. The case was dropped. But Sandra had tried to sue. The case never made it to court. The department had quietly settled and made her sign a non-disclosure agreement. Keanu whispered to himself, "How many times has this happened?" He didn't sleep that night. The next morning he called Emily. "I need your help," he said. "Can we meet?" They met at a small cafe outside the courthouse. She brought her daughter along. Mia sat at a corner table with a coloring book, while Keanu and Emily talked. "I think someone inside the department wants to talk," he said, "but they're afraid." "What do you want me to do?" she asked. "You've already done so much," he said. "But people trust your voice. They know you're real, not rich, not famous, just honest." Emily nodded. "You want me to speak out again?" "Not just speak," Keanu said. "Listen, if someone reaches out again, it might be to you." Emily took a deep breath. "I'm scared, Keanu." "So am I," he said gently. "But we can't stop now." By evening, Emily posted a video online. It wasn't fancy, just her sitting in her apartment. She spoke simply. "If you've been hurt by someone in uniform and silenced, you're not alone. I didn't think anyone would care when I shared that dashcam video, but they did. I'm not asking you to go public, I'm just asking you to reach out." The video went viral in under 48 hours. Over 100 messages came in. Most were thank yous, some were warnings, but one message stood out. A woman named Janelle claimed she used to work at the precinct. She had seen files disappear, had overheard Bradley brag about scaring people into forgetting. She even hinted that one officer had destroyed dashcam footage on purpose. But Janelle didn't want to meet in public. She was scared for her life. Keanu made a decision. He reached out to a retired federal agent he once met during a charity event. The man's name was Mr. Lockwood. Stern face, quiet voice, deeply respected. "I need someone who can dig quietly," Keanu said. "Someone with experience." Lockwood agreed. He began looking into the precinct piece by piece. Not from the outside, but through old friends and quiet sources. Within days, he found something buried. A signed complaint form, filed and time-stamped, but never entered into the department database. The complainant was a 15-year-old named Thomas. His file had been shredded, but someone had kept a copy. "They've been covering each other," Lockwood said. "This isn't just one bad officer, it's a culture." Keanu felt his heart sink. He thought he was walking into a courtroom story, a lie told in public. But now, he was inside something darker, deeper. He wasn't trying to save his name anymore. He was trying to stop a cycle. Late one evening, as Keanu walked out of a meeting with Lockwood, a black car rolled slowly down the street. The windows were tinted. It didn't stop. It didn't speed up. It just passed him, deliberately slow, as if to be seen. Keanu stood still, watched, then turned and walked away without saying a word. He knew what that meant. The people he was digging into now didn't play fair, and they didn't like being exposed. A week later, a surprise development hit the news. The judge who had presided over Keanu's case announced a formal review of all cases tied to Officer Bradley's name. The city council requested a hearing, and the police chief, who had remained silent, announced his resignation. But the real shock came when Janelle finally agreed to speak. On live television, Emily sat beside her, holding her hand. Janelle's voice shook as she said, "I saw the lies. I watched people come in bruised and broken. I was told to stay quiet, and I did for years. But I can't anymore." Keanu didn't just stand up for himself. He stood up for all of us. Tears filled her eyes. This wasn't just about a speeding ticket. This was about power and silence. And who gets to tell the story? The room stood and applauded. Keanu, watching from the back, remained seated because he knew. The hearing that shook the system, the city council chamber was packed. News crews lined the walls. Local reporters, national outlets, even international journalists had shown up. There wasn't a single empty chair. The marble floors echoed with whispers and tension. Outside, a crowd had gathered, some holding signs that said "Truth for All," others holding photos of family members who had been wronged, but never heard. Inside, Keanu Reeves sat silently in the third row. He wasn't scheduled to speak. He hadn't even asked to be there. But when the hearing was announced, he came quietly and without a single bodyguard. Beside him sat Emily. On her other side was Janelle, the former precinct employee who had broken her silence. Behind them sat the teenage boy Thomas, now 17, who had once filed a complaint that mysteriously vanished. This wasn't about one man anymore. This was about every voice that had been ignored, erased, or punished for telling the truth. The chair of the council, a tall woman with gray streaks in her hair and years of experience on her face, banged the gavel. "We are here today," she began, "to review systemic misconduct and cover-ups within the city police department, beginning with the case brought to light by Mr. Reeves." The first person called to speak was Janelle. Her voice shook as she told the room about falsified reports, missing footage, and the fear that kept her silent for years. "We were told to trust the system," she said. "But the system wasn't broken. It was built to protect itself." Next came Thomas. He had grown up a lot since the day he'd been slammed against a squad car and called a threat for walking home after dark. His voice was quiet but clear. "No one believed me," he said. "They told me not to make trouble. They said I was lucky to be released. He turned and looked at Keanu. But he believed me. And because of him, people finally listened. The room was quiet for a long time. Then, without being asked, Keanu stood. He walked slowly to the microphone. I wasn't going to speak, he said, because this hearing isn't about me. It's about the people who were hurt, ignored, and silenced. He paused, scanning the room. But I will say this. I'm not a hero. I didn't set out to fix anything. I just didn't want a lie to become my truth. But once I saw how deep the lie went, walking away stopped being an option. His voice grew firmer. This isn't about one bad cop. It's about a culture that protects itself instead of protecting the people it serves. And the only way that changes is if you, right now, decide to be different. He stepped away from the mic and sat down. The room remained silent. Not because they didn't have anything to say, but because, for once, someone had said exactly what needed to be heard. Later that day, news of the hearing spread everywhere. KeanuReeves speaks for the silenced. Systemic abuse exposed in emotional city council hearing. Woman breaks gag order. Uncovers years of police misconduct. The mayor announced an emergency task force to investigate the department. New rules were introduced. Body cams on at all times, third-party case reviews, and protections for whistleblowers, like Janelle. But with change came backlash. Officer Bradley, who had remained quiet since his suspension, broke his silence. In a live interview, he said, "I've been painted as the villain, but I was just doing my job. I followed orders. I'm not the only one who should be blamed." When asked what orders he meant, he paused, then said, "Ask my supervisor." That one sentence cracked open a door no one was ready for. Lockwood, the retired federal agent helping Keanu, dug deeper. He uncovered communication logs that showed direct orders from a higher-ranking officer, Captain Mills, telling Bradley to neutralize high-profile stops and prevent reputation damage to the department. One of the logs mentioned Keanu by name. "Keep the actor quiet, make him back down." Keanu stared at the document in disbelief. It wasn't just rogue behavior. It was a planned attempt to silence him. He took a slow breath. They wanted me to back down because they thought I would. 3 days later, Captain Mills was arrested. He tried to deny the messages at first, claimed they were faked, but under pressure, one of his assistants came forward with a hard drive. It held years of emails, internal memos, and audio recordings that proved it all. Officer Bradley wasn't acting alone. He was following orders, but he still lied. And now, both men were facing charges. At a community center across town, Keanu sat in a circle with Emily, Janelle, Thomas, and others who had stepped out of the shadows. No cameras, no reporters, just real people. "We did something," Emily whispered. "You did," Keanu said. "You reminded the world that one voice matters." "And now?" Thomas asked. "What happens next?" Keanu looked at him and smiled gently. "Now we rebuild." Just then, Keanu's phone buzzed. It was a message from the mayor's office. They were asking him to speak at a new initiative, an independent citizens board to oversee police conduct. In the city, Keanu read the message, looked around at the people who had become his family in truth, and nodded. Then let's make sure this never happens again. But as they walked out of the center, a plain envelope was taped to the door. No name. No return address. Inside was a photo. It showed Keanu speaking at the city council hearing, with a red X drawn over his face. A note was attached. "You think you've won, but we're still here." The truth had shaken the walls, but the shadows hadn't left. They tried to scare him. He gave them no place to hide. The envelope with the red X didn't surprise Keanu Reeves. By now, he understood that the deeper you push into the truth, the louder the darkness screams. But what they didn't understand was that fear no longer worked on him. He sat on the edge of his bed that night, holding the photo. He didn't tear it up. He didn't throw it away. He placed it neatly in a folder marked, "Truth always finds light." "They think this is a threat," he said aloud to himself. I see it as proof we're making progress. The next morning, Keanu walked into City Hall without a single word to the press waiting outside. They shouted his name, but he didn't turn. He walked straight into the council chamber where he had been invited to speak on the launch of the Independent Oversight Board. The same chamber that had once been filled with silence now rang with hope. The new board would include community, leaders, legal experts, and everyday citizens. People like Emily, Janelle, and Thomas. Keanu stood at the podium. His voice was steady, calm. We can't erase the past, he began. But we can make sure it doesn't repeat. Not by revenge, not by rage, but by watching, by listening, by refusing to stay silent. He stepped down, and the room stood to applaud. But outside, a new storm was forming. Captain Mills had been charged, but he wasn't acting alone. Lockwood uncovered more documents, emails between Mills and two other senior officers in neighboring districts. Together they had been managing a network that protected officers who crossed the line, altered reports, and silenced complaints. It wasn't just about one precinct. This was bigger. When the news broke, the headlines were louder than ever. KeanuReeves helps uncover statewide misconduct network. Hollywood star becomes voice for justice reform after shocking discoveries. Citizen-led truth movement gains momentum across the country, but not everyone celebrated. Keanu began receiving daily threats. Anonymous calls/tires, surveillance vans parked across from his hotel. He reported it all, but quietly. He didn't let the press twist the story into drama. Instead, he used it as fuel. In a surprise move, Keanu announced he would fund a scholarship program for students studying law and justice reform. He called it the Mia Initiative, named after Emily's daughter, the little girl who'd once asked if he was John Wick and now watched her mom help change the system. The announcement was made at a school gymnasium where students from all backgrounds had gathered to hear him speak. When truth is protected, Keanu said to the crowd of teens, so are the futures of people just like you. And if you ever feel small in the face of injustice, remember what Emily did. She drove a car, she pressed a button, and she stood for truth. After the event, Mia ran up and hugged him. You're not like the movies, she said with a giggle. What do you mean? He asked. You don't fight with your hands, you fight with your heart. Keanu smiled. Then I guess you just made me the strongest man in the room. But it wasn't over yet. One final investigation was still ongoing, into the office that had erased Thomas's complaint. Lockwood found proof that a former department clerk had been paid under the table to delete reports and rewrite narratives. This clerk, when caught, confessed in a full recorded interview. They told me it was for the good of the department, she said. They said some kids weren't worth the paperwork. Those words hit Keanu like a punch to the chest. He drove that night to the apartment where Thomas lived. They sat on the curb, the streetlights casting long shadows. They finally said it out loud, Keanu whispered. What we always feared. Thomas didn't cry. He just looked forward, eyes hard. Then let's make them hear us louder. The next week, the mayor signed a new law that would change how all city police records were stored and reviewed. An encrypted digital system, public review access, and the end of the old paper shredding days. Emily, Janelle, Thomas, and Keanu stood behind her as she signed it. It was called the Truth and Trust Act. Afterward, the mayor handed Keanu a pen. He shook his head and passed it to Emily. She earned this, he said. She started it. Months passed. The world didn't change overnight, but the shift had begun. Keanu stepped away from the headlines. He returned to filming quietly, choosing roles that told deeper stories. But on his days off, he visited schools, community centers, and city halls, listening to voices that had once been too soft to hear. One day, he returned to that small courthouse, the place where it all began. He sat in the gallery, unnoticed by most. The judge spotted him and gave the faintest nod. On the stand that day was a young boy, scared, nervous, trying to tell the truth about something that had happened to him. Keanu watched silently and smiled, because now, the truth had a seat in every room, and no one, not even those in power, could make it disappear again.